Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10 and support the channel at the same time. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to this special edition of the Magic the Gathering Market Watch. We're going to check out all things Guilds of Ravnica. It's been approximately 2 weeks since the set was released. We've seen these cards in competitive play now for a little bit. Although their roles will change in the coming weeks, I have no doubt. We're going to see which cards as of right now are hot and which ones are cold. Quickly before we get started though, just a fast reminder, if you check out the description below, you'll find a few ways to help support what we do here at the channel. Our Patreon page is down there. You're also going to find links to products on Amazon. If you make any purchases on Amazon, once you go through that link, we'll get a small percentage. Finally, Flipside Gaming still offering a promo code for our viewers. And they're doing pre-orders right now for the guild kits that come out on November 2nd if you're looking for those. But as always, thank you not only to the folks that look at those links, but to each and every one of you. You all make the channel what it is. Thank you, and let's get into it. Before we get into our top 10s, I just wanted to point out Impervious Great Worm ticks up a little bit this week, up 66 cents to $8.99. Of course, this is the buy a box promo. I think for the most part, this is going up because it lost a lot of value last week. So I think you're just getting a little bit of normalization happening this week. I do expect it to go down more, though, in the coming weeks. All right, let's move on to our top 10 Guilds of Ravnica cards that have lost value this week. Coming in number 10, Unmoored Ego, down 32 cents to $1.50. This is kind of a sweet card. I think the problem is I have seen a lot of people trying this out in different Modern decks, and I do think it will stick in some in the sideboard. However, there's so many cards in Modern and Legacy that do this kind of thing, and color requirements aren't as strict, even though this is unique in a lot of ways. It also feels familiar. So I don't know if this is going to take the place of a lot of the other cards we already see in those formats, but I do think it will play a small role. Overall, it is a rare. There's a lot of copies being open right now. This will come down a little more, I think. Number 9, Mausoleum Secrets, down 40 cents to $1.51. This is maybe one of those cards that had higher expectations during the pre-release time because it is a tutor, even though it does have some restrictions. Still lets you tutor at instant speed. There's nothing wrong with that. Problem is, it really hasn't found a home in this current standard, and it really needs to gain some traction when it comes to pricing, especially, again, considering it's a rare, not a mythic. So until it finds a home at some point, and I do think it will while it's in standard, maybe not this standard season, but in the future, at least for right now, I think this is another one that's going to tick down a little more before it stabilizes. Number 8, March of the Multitudes, down 43 cents to $13.66, our first mythic on the list. Now, a couple weeks ago, as we were going into the first weekend of competitive play, this card saw a pretty big boost, as Selesnya Tokens decks had a lot of buzz around them, and it didn't hurt also that they did perform well at the Star City Games Team Open a couple weeks back. The teams coming in first and second place were running that as their standard build, as a matter of fact. So, with all that excitement around the card, it did have a pretty nice jump, and we've been waiting for it to snap back a little bit. Well, it's finally happening. Also, even though I think the Selesnya Tokens decks will continue to put up good results here and there going forward, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to hold the $13, $14 price point either. Just being popular in one deck, even if it is a 4 of in that deck, probably isn't going to be enough. I do think this continues to trend down in the coming weeks. Number 7 is Swiftblade Vindicator, down 45 cents to $1.29. Now, this had a nice little spike coming out of the first weekend of competitive play due to the Boros aggro builds. Now, I have noticed, though, in the last couple weeks since then, and last weekend was kind of weird because we didn't have any huge tournaments in Standard last week. We had a lot of team limited stuff going on. So people have had time to think about things, and I've noticed the Boros cards are going down in value. They are getting a little bit colder, ones that are specific to that deck, as opposed to the mono-red aggro deck. Those continue to be hot. Number 6, Assassin's Trophy, down 45 cents to $20.98. Even though this card had a huge price point coming out of the pre-release, $25 for a rare is very, very high and atypical. But of course, this card had a lot of hype around it. Has it lived up to the hype? I would say somewhat. This is seeing play in Standard and Golgari mid-range decks. However, the first weekend, the 2 decks that did make it into major top 8s that were Golgari mid-range were not running copies of this, which was weird. Now, many other builds are. And if you go outside of Standard, there are people trying this out. For example, we saw a couple of these in a top 8 deck that was a Dredge Modern build come out of the sideboard. We saw a copy in Punishing Abzan and Legacy in a major tournament in a top 8. So there are people trying it out, if nothing else. I do think in the coming weeks, players are going to figure out where this card is best utilized in a number of different decks across formats. And when that happens, this card will probably zero in on a more correct price point. Will it be $20? I don't know. I do think it will be somewhere between $15 and $20 most likely. It will still be an expensive rare because it is a very solid removal card. Number 5, Ral Is It Viceroy, down 46 cents to $9.46. Now, this did see play in those Jeskai control builds, usually a 1 or 2 of, not like a 3 or 4 of necessarily, but it has seen at least a little bit of standard play. Now, I do think that deck is popular and we'll see more play going forward, but much like March of the Multitudes, if that's the only deck running this, and in this case only a copy or 2, you can't expect this to hold a $9, $10 price point. This will continue to go down as well, even if the deck is successful. Number 4, Tajik Legion's Edge, down 65 cents to $2. This one another victim of those Boros cards cooling off a little bit, but this one did see a tad bit of modern play. In that Star City Games Open a couple weeks ago, that team event, the team that came in first place was running a Humans deck with a copy of this in the main. So I don't know if that's going to catch on, but even if it does, only one copy won't influence the price of this all that much. Again, I think this one will stabilize under $2. Number 3 is Nullhide Ferox, down 82 cents to $7.99. Another mythic on our list, and this one looks kind of cold for a couple of reasons. One, again, it's only seeing serious play in one deck, Steel Leaf Stompy. And again, that first week in competitive play, Steel Leaf Stompy didn't look all that amazing. Doesn't mean it can't make a comeback, and even if it does, is this going to be a part of it is the other question. And I'll be honest, I'm a little down on this one after seeing it the first weekend of play. It just doesn't feel like it's all that great. Like, you have to get this thing out early for it to matter. 6/6 on turn 3 is really good, maybe even could win you a game here or there. But if that doesn't happen, the card is not very impressive later on in the game. So I do think this one continues to trend down as well. Number 2, Mission Briefing, down 89 cents to $5. Now, this hasn't seen a ton of standard play. Sometimes a control deck will run a copy of it here or there, but a lot of the more successful ones so far have not touched this card. And because of that, it does go down. It will go down some more. I will say, though, the Modern Dimir Mill deck, which kind of lurks around out there in the Modern field, it is running some copies of this card. Now, most decks would prefer Snapcaster Mage if they have that available to them, but that particular deck actually kind of likes Mission Briefing. Will it propel it into Tier 1 status? Probably not, but if the deck became a little more consistent, you could see some people gravitating towards this card because it is a very popular deck among certain players. So I do think it will continue to go down. Even if that deck did take off and do better, I don't really think this card would go up all that much. Number 1 is Pelt Collector, down $1.37 to $5.98. Couple of reasons why this card's going down. First off, the decks that are running it haven't proven themselves yet. Steel Leaf Stompy and Standard being one of them, Suicide Zoo that Magic Aids put together, and Modern being the other. Now, if one of those decks puts up a good result in the coming weeks, well, that could change for Pelt Collector. But also remember that this card saw a pretty big surge going into that first weekend, mostly because of that Suicide Zoo deck. And what you're seeing now is a lot of snapback based on the fact that the card had to normalize anyway, and we haven't seen it put up a huge result yet. Now, with that being said, the Suicide Zoo deck hasn't really been around all that long, and there are some big Modern tournaments coming up this weekend, so who knows, if it can put up a big result, this will quickly stabilize and go back up. Alright, let's move on to the top 10 Guilds of Ravnica cards that have gained value this week. Number 10, Plaguecrafter, and this one's an uncommon, up 26 cents to 90 cents. Now, for an uncommon to climb that much in 1 week, especially when all these packs are being cracked, that's really saying something. This card showing up in those Golgari mid-range decks looks very solid there. Number 9, Niv Mizzet Perrin, up 26 cents to $2.10. Again, it's not going up a whole lot, but this is an indication that there are people paying attention to the card. It definitely has seen play in a number of different decks so far in Standard. Jeskai Control, at least some of the variants are running it. Jeskai Spells will run it. The Dragons deck, don't forget about that. That could come back and surprise you at some point. So I actually think this card could go up just a little bit more in the coming weeks. Not necessarily because it's a 4 of and a whole bunch of decks or anything, but seeing enough play, 1 or 2 ofs, even if it is out of the board, does warrant maybe higher than a $2 price tag. Number 8, Find and Finality, up 29 cents to $1.99. This is maybe one of the most underrated cards because, first off, it looks very solid in the decks that it is in. Golgari midrange, Abzan midrange, Steel Leaf Champion, for example. Card does work in all those builds, so I do think it will continue to do well in those builds going forward, and I think it's going to find other homes in the future as well. It's just a solid card. $2, if you don't have a playset of these yet, I'd grab them. Number 7, Deafening Clarion, up 56 cents to $2. Where a lot of the other Boros cards are cooling off this week, this one is going up at least a little bit. Although I will say even this one is losing value if you look at the last 24 to 48 hours or so. But this does see play in Boros Angels. It also sees play in Jeskai Control. I think that's the main reason it hasn't lost as much value as some of the others. Number 6, Risk Factor, up 56 cents to $9.94. Here we go with some Mono Red Aggro. This card looked pretty amazing that first weekend of competitive Standard play, and I don't think the Mono Red deck's going away. This card, though, is still kind of expensive for a rare. Once the hype dies down and more copies get out there, the price will go down. So if you want to build this deck and you don't need to build it for a tournament like this week or the next week or something, I would wait a little bit. I think you'll be able to pick these up for closer to $5, $6, maybe a month or two down the road once everybody gets their copies, but this card's not really going to go anywhere. Now, aside from that, this also has seen a little modern play in a new deck called Runaway Red. It's a new take basically on modern mono red aggro using a lot of more contemporary cards. In fact, another one on the list is in that deck as well. Again, it's unproven. We have to kind of see it put up a big result before I think a lot of people will take to it. But if it does, this card could have another spike before it goes down. Number 5, Steam Vents, up 85 cents to $9.95. Where most of the other shock lands are finally stabilizing, starting to go down in value a little bit as packs get cracked, this one is still on the rise because it is a key part of so many control builds right now, whether it's Izzet or Jeskai or Grixis Control. A lot of players trying to build those decks in Standard right now, and not to mention the fact that this is a big part of a lot of modern mana bases. Number 4, Ionize, up 98 cents to $4.89. And of course, Jeskai Control is the name of the game here. In Standard, a lot of people are building that deck right now, so this card actually has a pretty big jump percentage-wise this week. Number 3, Vraska Golgari Queen, up $1.19 to $12.83. This card felt a little flat last week just because I think a lot of people felt like those decks that were running it didn't do as well as they anticipated week 1. Golgari midrange, Abzan midrange, didn't put up the big results, even though a couple Golgari midrange decks did make it into a couple top 8s. Just felt like people had higher expectations for that deck overall. Since then, I think players have been retooling and there's more confidence in that deck going into the coming weeks. All it needs is a big result coming in first or second in a tournament, and this card could jump a little more. Now, those decks only run usually 1 or 2 copies of this. So again, much like many of the other cards we're talking about today, don't expect a huge spike or anything, even if the deck performs well. It might go up just a little bit before it stabilizes and begins its descent again. This is another card, if you need it, I'd wait a little while. $13, $14 is going to be a little too high considering the amount of play that I think this is going to see going forward. Number 2 is Arclight Phoenix, up $1.44 to $5.50. Now here's a mythic that was maybe underestimated a little bit during the pre-release time, but this card is showing up in Standard and Izzet Spells decks, and it's also showing up in that Runaway Red deck in Modern as well. So another card that might be spiking a little bit in the future if that deck can put up a good result going forward. And number 1, Expansion Explosion, up $2.24 to $3.09. Again, it's all about Izzet this week, you might have noticed. People are gravitating off Boros onto Izzet, I think, and we see a lot of those cards jumping. This is another card that I think was maybe underestimated, undervalued early on in some ways, and it's not as good as this card, don't get it twisted, but in some ways it reminds me of Sphinx's Revelation. So for Jeskai control builds, Izzet control builds, they're going to want copies of this going forward. Alright, with that being said, that's the Market Watch for today. Now, if you want to hear about what's going on in the rest of the world of Magic the Gathering outside of Guilds of Ravnica, we'll be doing our regular Market Watch episode on Saturday where we're going to look at everything else. But until then, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.